woke us all quite a bit, listening to all the interesting facts and the question by Jacob. I don't think I need to say anything more, except move on to introduce our very next speaker. Jayaprakash Rajangam is a finance and risk management professional. For the last 2 decades, he has been a consultant to businesses in India and abroad in his domain. He is an active speaker in public forums with a penchant for blending Bharatiya values with contemporary practices. To ably propound this further, he is currently pursuing his PhD from Chinmaya Vishwavidyapeeth at Kerala. His interest is in examining possibilities of intersections between Bharatiya Arthashastra and public finance. Let's please give him a very warm welcome. Round of applause, please.
Thank you. Are we on? Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Hina. And to get that introduction from someone who's born, brought up outside of India, and to hear about Indic Bharatiya value cultures is a good contrast too. So, having said that, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jayaprakash. I was in a very different manner told about JP, that's how people address me. JP, it's a post-afternoon session, and we are giving you a project of not speaking but keeping people awake. So I said, yeah, let me try my best. And I should thank Rajesh, yeah, if I got the name right, that I guess he's at least tuned to the finance field that I come from. Anyone else from the finance field here as an account? Oh, there's a fair bit, so I know there is company that I can keep with and survive. Having said that, I'm also conscious about the time, so I'm trying to pace my conversation with you for about 20-25 minutes, and the balance, if there are any questions and you're still awake, we'll try and pick it up from there. The interesting premise was, when I was briefed about this reform, perform, transform as a primary theme for the whole session in a project management context. So it quickly brought to me only one example which I have loved a lot to narrate in various places, but I guess this is the most apt forum that I can think about. The reason being as follows. So many of us would possibly remember that we had paid about 32 rupees for outgoing calls. Yeah? At 32 rupees for outgoing calls, and most of us remember 16 rupees for incoming call. So all of this was mid-90s, early 2000s at best, and then it changed. What happened after that? So I would not surely ask Mr. Rajesh, he has an amazing elephantine memory. So after that, around 2000s, what happened was mother's love. Yeah? I'm not sure how many of you remember that. Mother's love, that is, yeah. So our Virendra Seva came and said, "Maa ka pyar," and he promoted Reliance Infocom with 2 M's. Why 2 M's? Mother's love, again, M. Yeah? So the reason I pick up this example for this forum is if you actually go back and look at what happened, why did 36 rupees, 32 rupees outgoing call become a rupee and today is nothing? Right? If you actually go back and see, there is a big project management initiative sitting in there. And that's what I would want to say about reformation of the telecommunications sector as one of the examples, and we'll expand and we'll see how we can expand to other sectors. But it's a very beautiful narrative. I'll take about a couple of minutes, and hopefully, anyone from the telecommunications sector? Yeah, so if I'm gassing around, obviously we'll have some people saying, JP, that's gas. Yeah, so no issues. That's good to know. So having said that, the prices were essentially high because the whole technology backbone at that time was around setting up towers and base stations. The license fees was huge upfront. So obviously there was a commercial angle at play. So commercial angle itself was not permitting prices to come down. So the patriarch, whom I regard highly for the business aspect, other things can be set in and have it in different conversations. But the patriarch came and said, this is rubbish. Everyone should have mobiles. That's what all of us have, smartphones today. We progressed to that angle. So he said that, and that is why the transformation happened. And it was done by a chemical engineer who had no grounding in telecommunication. Again, I'm giving these inputs because finally my conversation is going to veer towards finance. And there are limited finance people, so obviously you'll say, hey, JP, what's this all about? We are all project management professionals. Why are we talking about finance? But you will see it doesn't matter because that's the whole premise of the conversation I'm trying to have. So a chemical engineer went to Strand bookstall, which unfortunately is shut down now, and he picked up a book on telecommunication. He read it through and he said, now let's reimagine, reform the whole telecommunication sector. So what did they do? What are the project management there? I'll come to that very shortly. They essentially said, What is Reliance core competency? Anyone here who want to say what is Reliance Group's core competency? Yeah. Scalability, oil and gas, big projects. Each of them has a truth inside. Each of them has a truth inside. But if you ask me, one of the core strength, all of this being there, the core strength, if you ask me, is their ability to manage large, complex projects. Now, this is where the telecom, so what did they said? For me to set up towers, base stations, place by place, location by location, extremely time consuming. The capacity was limited. So thereby, obviously, they'll never be able to reach all across India. The commercial dynamics will never be fulfilled. So they came up with this alternative plan of connecting the whole of India through optic fibers. That's why you'll go back, if you actually see in those days, optic fiber was in huge demand. So they dug the whole of India. And this is what I'm trying to say. It's easy to visualize. So, and very difficult to implement. And this is where the project management capability came in. They visualized, we'll connect the whole of India through optic fiber cable. A cable has a huge bandwidth capacity, so unlimited calls. The cost of operating cable, once you have set up cable, there's no additional cost. It's working by itself. So I can charge a rupee and still make money because there's no cost of operations. That's from finance side. Very easy, simple. But now look at the project management complexity. So they put that as a broad idea, and then they started trying to see how to implement. So then they saw, if I have to lay about 180,000 kilometers of cables across India, I have to dig. There are about, at the minimum, 540 different jurisdictions, which has multiple sub-level panchayats, so on and so forth. So the whole complexity grew up to about 3,000 to 3,500 different regulators whose permission had to be sought under multiple regulations further, which would mean if I go to Mumbai BMC, there will be a PW from which will I have to take permission, I will take permission from some green tribunal. There's so many permissions, right? So it became a big mammoth task, and in India, we all know, right, to get permissions by itself is age, yeah? So and we all know Reliance, anything it doesn't record time. It's great in terms of its ability to roll out scalable projects. So this is where the project management initiative came, and it's anecdotal from that perspective, so don't take everything as it is. There is a truth below, but there is a fair amount of grayish stuff there. So what did they do? To go and get permissions from about 5,000 different people at various times, it's going to be always a challenge. So they came up with a lovely idea. That was, they appointed a lawyer for every district jurisdiction. Does it resonate? So the core project management idea, which according to me is a great plan, is they appointed a lawyer for every district jurisdiction. Why? Because there is no way on earth they could get every permission to dig. Which means the moment they start laying cables, they are breaking some law somewhere. So the contractor either will be put behind bars, or there will be a stay order. Do you all agree? And these are two alternatives. Either of the way, the project gets stalled. So what is the whole idea? This particular lawyer has to only do one thing. Every day morning, go to the court, get the stay vacated, or get the damn person back on bail. Because only he'll know where to dig again. Right? This was rolled out over and over again, and did they implement that in record? It is a record fast rollout of telecommunication cables across India. The moment they completed it, once I have optic fiber cable, I have connected the whole of India. For me to route a call at 1 paisa doesn't matter because there is no incremental cost. Every paise is a profit. Am I making sense broadly? That's reformation of the telecommunications sector. Massively done in a large scale. But that's where beauty of karma is, right? So when you do something, the karma comes back again. So what happened now? We also know today that the same Reliance Infocom, which became communication, now is the bane for the second brother to have lost his complete net worth. I'm sure all of you have read Anil Ambani going on record to say his net worth is 0 or negative. The same Reliance Communication. But look at the alternative story there, and that's beauty of life again. His other brother manages to create a Jio by investing something in the order of about 250,000 crores. Right? That's the kind of number we're talking about. So again, what's happening? There was a reformation of the telecommunications sector, yes. Did it do well for the society? The answer is all of us enjoyed gains, yes. But somewhere the performance didn't happen. What is the question? But the key moot point I would want you to leave, because that's not the key conversation that we're going to have, the moot point I want to leave is the project management skill is what made that revolution happen. And that's what each one of you should take as a message from here, that for every transformation, reformation, there is a project management skill deep inside embedded. Now here, what I would want to also share is, obviously there is a lot of change happening there, which is what my practice area is. I'm primarily a consultant advising companies on mergers, acquisition, and organic growth. So this is not me trying to promote my business, no. It's about creating a context. The context is, in every transaction environment, there is a base core philosophy of trying to be able to address such changes in the marketplace. So if I were to just point out a few things that are happening today. If you look at today's economy, geopolitical environment, which is where everything starts off from, Brexit, we have finally seen after about 9 years of conversation, about 3 years of dilly-dally, they're finally making it happen. We also know that thereby Britain is indeed having a challenge of how to manage businesses. There are a lot of businesses. So Tata, for example, they went down to UK, they bought a large company, and now they're figuring out how to reconfigure the supply chain for Tata Motors to be able to be compliant with what Brexit is going to bring them on table for. So if you speak to anyone in Britain that you would have as connect, they all will say today we are trying to reconfigure our systems to be compliant with Brexit reality. Coronavirus, let's say the better. Yep. So what's happening in terms of, it might wash out at least $150 billion of trade out of China. That's kind of a conservative estimate. It can go farther. We have got a presidential impeachment on the political side, which was very nicely managed. I guess everywhere political management easier. Then there is increased level of polarization, perceived polarization in our mind. There's a lot of friction between race, caste, community, so on and so forth. So a lot of, in nutshell, everything you pick up, there is a turbulent geopolitical, geo-socio-political environment issue. And which is what transaction guys thrive on, because the moment there is fear, there is obviously a consultant somewhere wanting to advise or give a solution. So what's this unpredictability in the political environment looking at? So if you look at it, every business is getting impacted. I've just articulated very few here. The trade war between US and China is impacting a whole supply chain. The whole supply chain. If you look at British reworking, which I already spoke about, simple thing, India itself, our ability to buy oil from Iran is getting obviously impacted because there is an embargo. So every business is getting impacted one way or other. And obviously, you don't need to speak about the last one, ever-changing taxation. And taxation has always become a bane. So you have GST which came in. You have, you have the lot of changes with respect to POEM. Anyone heard of POEM? It's a lovely acronym. Tax guys can come up with all acronyms. POEM, right? It's about place of effective management. It doesn't matter where you are operating from. You'll still be taxed in a jurisdiction which can be very different from where you're operating. So stuff like that, there is a lot of ever-changing stance on taxation, on regulations governing economy, so on and so forth. So these are all the nice platter which brings to the consultant a good business to do. Now, how are we converting, or what is happening, which is where we are trying to connect project management with what's happening in the response to these changes. So if you see there is a reorganization supply chain, there's a project out there. If you look at delivery models breaking out, so I will give a couple of examples for each of this in the next slide, but I'm just outlining the conversation. Delivery models streak to onshore, offsite. So US guys, if you're anyone who's working in the IT sector, the only conversation any major CFO today is happening, be it Infosys, pick up any large company, is about how visas are going to be handled and whether they can deliver projects out of US or not, what to do. That's a primary question. So these are all requiring change. This all entails change. Reconfiguring revenue models. Do I build from India? Do I build from China? Do I build from Hong Kong? Because POEM, as I said, place of effective management, all of these are coming in place. So this is again a question which comes in. And finally, last but not the least, because it's finance, I love finance, is about expected return on management or return on investment. Finally, the proof of the pudding is in eating it. I do all of business to finally make money. If it is high risk environment. So today, for example, in India, if you're looking at equity investment, we are expecting about 20 to 23% return minimum. If a project doesn't give that, rest assured, no funder is going to fund you, unless they are fools. And the definition of fools is friends and families. Yeah, so the idea is finally there should be reflection in the expected return on investment. Today's time, there is, I can say about 2 years back, if person was doing at 18, 20% return on investment, today they're asking at least 24, 26%, where there's a heightened expectation of risk and thereby the heightened expectation of returns. So I've tried to calibrate those conversations into the same logic that the theme of this whole day is. And I like the theme for sure and the color scheming too. So first is, let's say, reform. So when you look at reform, I articulate or try and associate it with demergers, restructuring. And here, how many of you would have experienced IBC, which is the insolvency and bankruptcy code? Yeah. So if you ask me, my personal experience on that, so nice that we have a couple of them. It's hardcore project management work if you personally ask me. But who is managing it? Some chartered accountant, it is my, right? Some chartered accountant is essentially managing it. For what purposes? It's essentially, does he know the operation? The answer is chartered accountant doesn't know any operations, right? Typically, if I have to give an analogy from a very different perspective, in all the organizations that I have worked on, there would be an internal audit process. Do you all agree? Internal audit, everyone would have seen here, right? Typically, how does internal audit happen? So generally, when I speak in directors' forums also, and I ask this question to directors also. How does internal audit happen in your organization? So the feedback that generally comes is, JP, we appoint a chartered accountancy firm, their people come, do internal audit and go, we get a report. Now I would ask you, if you're a cement manufacturing company, what will an articled assistant or a qualified accountant know about cement manufacturing, input, output norms, or anything to do with the business? Nothing. Why is he being entrusted? So the same question here, an IBC is essentially a project. An insolvency resolution is a project. And what is a chartered accountant sitting there doing? I can't understand even today. Because when I speak to the chartered accountants, my own fraternity guys, I'm not a practitioner on that space, they all are clueless. They're all actually floating and they are asking for multiple. So they are asking for people with relevant capabilities to come, join, and then work together. But for me, if you ask me, it's more a project management domain. And if I have to again bring in here, I'm sure typically Institute of Chartered Accountants is very good at lobbying. Okay, so anything new it corners. So my suggestion to this forum and obviously through the chapter here to the central PMI would be you guys should look at lobbying. Right? You should look at lobbying to try and say this is essentially a project management job, not a chartered accountant, not a company secretary. But having said that, if I have to again draw an analogy to the, I love the Bharatiya culture. Even gods say lobbying is important. Nothing wrong with lobbying, right? So generally first is lobby. Is it right thing to do? So if you see even Lord Ganesha lobbied with his mother and father for the purpose of obtaining the mango. Yeah, we all know that story, right? Where Lord Ganesha circumambulated his parents to get the mango and his brother was still flying around the world. Yeah, so there's nothing wrong in lobbying. Lobbying is essential for us to progress. Right? So that's something which clearly on the reformation side, there is a huge runway of at least another 3-4 years. A lot more insolvencies, a lot more bankruptcies are in pipeline. It's a big business for sure. I'm not sure how many of you are in the consulting space, but anyone on the consulting side, it's something which I would strongly recommend you should look at. Get a chartered accountant enrolled with you. Become the IBC. He can work for you, not the other way around. Yeah. So I am from that institute, but that's my genuine belief based on the gap that I see in the way things are being looked at in addressing the IBC. Now we look at the next context is performance. If I reform, next is perform. In the performance side, again a huge change is happening. If I were to give an example here on the performance side, Ola, Uber, all of us have used it, right? It is a very classic example of how business had to be completely reconfigured. And in there is a fair amount of, if you ask me, project management also. So initially when Ola, Uber came in, they came with a logic that they will buy the car and they'll appoint drivers. I don't know how many of you have tracked that. Right? Initially when they came, they used to buy the car and they used to buy the Dabba car, Renault Kwid. Yeah? It was actually a box, that's it, nothing else. It was just moving in the box. So they bought all of that and then they appointed drivers. The drivers were paid salaries, which means they are sitting from a finance context on fixed costs. They're investing huge money upfront. And they're also paying driver whether there is revenue or not. Now this was burning cash like no one's business. We know even now, Ola and Uber are not making money. That's a different conversation, but that was really burning huge cash. So they converted the whole business model from this fixed cost investment base to a variable cost, where they said every driver buys his car. I'm only giving you assurance with respect to channelizing revenues, which means Ola or Uber is out of the risk of having to invest, having to manage their cars, insurance, so on and so forth. Complete transformation of business model. This requires a whole suite of change to processes, whole suite of changes to contractual structures. Again, this is a wide-ranging ambit of the discussions and processes. So it's a big thing with respect to managing the transition, and that is what, again, it's something which I would strongly recommend is for, again, project management guys to look at. Many of you might be doing in your organizations if you're working these kind of propositions. So, but I've seen this working in Ola, Uber, as I said. The other is the great thing that's happening with respect to long-term investments of flexible assets. This is again driving the business today. We all know WeWorks, yeah? The guy who owned WeWorks, he was the first, he's the narcissist to the highest order. He said, I'll be the first trillionaire in the world and I'll conquer death. I don't know whether you guys know, Adam Newman. Adam, if you go and do a Google search, Adam Newman, he was audacious about three months back. He went on record to say, I'll be the first trillionaire in the world and I'll conquer death. So what happens? Audacity obviously has its own way of karma coming back to you, yeah? So within about 3 or 4 weeks' time, was removed from the company, right? And he's out. But the whole idea, the WeWorks concept is what? WeWorks says, I am going to own buildings, so companies don't need to own the buildings. I'll only lease startups, everyone. That's the whole idea, which means converting for an average small business investments which are stuck in non-productive assets for them to be putting in productive assets, which again requires a whole suite of change in the way you look at business. So again, there's a huge change. If you examine any business, you'll find at the core companies wanting to move from fixed long-term investments to short variable investments. This transition requires planning. This transition requires clear articulation of objectives, process identification, implementation. Again, a very, very, and this is it's omnipresent across every industry you could look at. Last one is transformation, just closest to my heart because that's what that's where my core competency lies, which is mergers, acquisitions, and this is where everything transformation. If I have to give an example of transformation, Google, okay? Google business. What is Google all about? We've got to ask a question. What is Google all about? If I have to ask the question to ourselves. Sorry, we can just have someone try and share an idea. So is there a mic that can move along? Search engine. Is that how it makes money, search engine? So all of us are from business side, right? So we need to be conscious about when I say what is a business, which means how is the money flowing in? How is the money honey coming in, yeah? Advertising, okay. Is there any other view, advertising, other than advertising? Data collection. So how would they make money out of data collection is still the question. So it's a fair answer. My submission here is I am not saying anything is right or wrong. It's our understanding or our view of the matter, perception of the matter. How do I make money? I get these answers in most of the forums that I ask as to how does that user experience, how does that data actually become the dollar or the rupee or the paisa into my account? How does that conversion happen?
Insights, selling insights.
Who
Meaningful insights.
Who pays
to companies like healthcare, to companies like...
Perfect. So, which means I am converting the data into something intelligible for people who want to advertise or reach in the market. So, if you're personally asking me, it's nothing but all of you use that term, it's an advertising agency, it's a media platform. It's a media platform. But look at the transformation that happened in Google. If you look at Google, it has not grown by itself per se organically. Okay? Google's transition into Alphabet is a lovely case study for anyone to look at how transformation can be managed extensively through acquisition, and inside acquisition lies a core called post-merger or acquisition integration. Now, if you go and read, say, Deloitte's report, the last 2019's Deloitte's report, they've come up with an interesting study on post-merger acquisition integration, and they have said that 28% of the companies acquiring business attribute that their acquisition failed because post-merger integration didn't happen. This is a direct feedback, but if you start reading at all the other so-called identified parameters, you will again find that they go back into a merger integration process not thought through. And that is the core that I would want to leave some more, spend some time speaking about, that at the end of the day, there are a large number of deals that are happening. I've given some numerics here, but that's irrelevant. I can tell you there are massive deals happening in India and outside India. Even if you focus in India, there is consolidation happening. There are a lot of transactions happening on the acquisition and merger space, which entails integration. And this is the chart I would want to leave, and since as a logic. So I know it's a little far away. I'm not sure how well you could read, but obviously it will come to you as presentation. What I would want to articulate here is highlight. If you look at the steps involved, I've captured the typical post-merger, post-acquisition integration syndrome here. What happens? And you'll find it is exactly similar to what a typical project manager does. Nothing different. Anyone who's actually worked on post-merger integration in this forum? So there's one there. Yeah, there are a few here. Yeah. So you would agree, right? A post-merger integration or acquisition is primarily to do more project management. Again, if you see, it is generally led, by either the finance team in one way or other. Generally, now it's slowly changing, but and thereby there's limited view on the operations side. So the whole process actually works in the same logic, where you identify the key reasons for the acquisition, you identify those drivers, and then you say, okay, fair, whoever is my target, how his processes will either get integrated or whether I will subsume it, so on and so forth. Here, if I have to leave again an analogy, because we're not looking at a technical session, so don't worry, I'm not going to go to a technical session, but I want to leave a larger principle or logic. Larger principle or logic that I would want to leave is, if you look at the story of Mahabharata, right, there is a project there. What is the project in Mahabharata? War is the project, yeah. War is indeed a project, indeed. Sorry? To win over or decimate Kauravas, yeah, fair. So one of the project is to win over or decimate the Kauravas. But if I have to, and none of that logic is wrong, if I have to try and add a dimension because we're in a forum of project management, if we have to add a dimension, there were two parallel projects going in Mahabharata. One was headed by Sri Krishna, and the other was headed by Shakuni. So if you look at it, two project managers, did both of them achieve their objective? Any feedbacks? Both of them wonderfully accomplished their objectives. Their projects were, so the same here, I will try and connect it to the finance side. But having said that, I want to prod this before a little more, because that's the whole crux of what happens, or failures for why post-merger integration doesn't happen, or projects per se fail. So the point here is, when you look at Shakuni's project, what was the project for Shakuni? Bhishma and Drona to be annihilated. No, his idea was annihilation of Kuru clan. Not only Bhishma or Drona was not Kuru clan anyway. His idea was to annihilate the whole Kuru clan. Did he do it well? He did exceedingly well, right? No one was alive after the bad war of Mahabharata. But what was the principle sitting in there? What are the values sitting in there? The value was, he was driving his personal agenda through Duryodhana. Everything that Duryodhana did was primarily driven or advised, guided, promoted by Shakuni, right? That Shakuni was driving agenda, his agenda. Now you look at the other extreme, Sri Krishna. What was his agenda? His project was, on a very large causation basis, his project was to establish dharma in a very large manner, right? So did he establish dharma? The answer is, what was left to establish is a question mark. So who were left for dharma to even continue is a question. But having said that, if one just takes a step back, and actually if you see, the way he managed his project was not through driving his objectives. He was allowing his, if for the lack of any other term in this conversation, I'll say his CEO. So for Shakuni, his CEO or the chief person was Duryodhana. For Krishna, it was Arjuna or Yudhishthira, whomsoever, because I would say Yudhishthira is the prime candidate. Arjuna was one of the instruments used for the purpose of the war, right? So Yudhishthira, if you actually examine, Yudhishthira, all the Pandavas were losers through and through until intervention by Sri Krishna or intervention by Draupadi. If you go and examine the whole story, Pandavas were losers through and through. But the project was for Krishna. So let's go back. The project for Krishna was establishment dharma. The dharma was broken multiple times in between. But his intervention was very limited or only at the time when it was extreme. Extreme. So you know that the Dvit Sabha, what happened was extreme. His intervention was there. So there was a Shishupala story where until 100 time abuse, he was just standing aside. Adharma happened. The 100 times Shishupala said, he was killed. Multiple such examples. So if I have to link that back, I have in my experience, because I do transactions and then I leave it for the firm to work because I am only an advisor. I am not a post-merger integration specialist and I don't claim to be one. Right? So when I see, I have done transactions, I have left it on board for the organizations to really breed and take benefit out of it. And then I go back and have conversations, I feel that they have failed for one of these two reasons. On one end of the reason is that the key project or the post-merger integration person is driving his agenda. He has forgotten why the transaction was done. He's wanting to prevail, his personal views, his personal agenda. It happens a lot, and thereby if a CEO himself becomes the key person doing post-merger integration, which is a project, the project will fail. It has to be independent professional, and again, that's why I would obviously say, that that's an interesting way of looking at businesses for yourself, that post-merger integration has to be done by independent professionals. Now, when I've seen independent professionals on the other end of the spectrum, so just two transactions I was sharing before the session started. In the last 3 months, two of the transactions that I was advising closed out, and I've seen them in close quarters in the technology space. There are examples on the other end where the post-merger integration is a professional, but he is extremely hands-off and not involved. So we are in Kali Yuga. We are not Sri Krishna to draw boundaries. We need to be able to regularly interact and always make those corrections. But I found a lot of cases, most of the cases rather, that the project manager who's involved in project so-called post-merger integration is completely hands-off. He's just not worried. He's drawn an activity chart and left it at that. I've seen this multiple times, and that's why failure happens. Because we are the people who originated the idea. I'm the consultant who originated the idea. I feel sad when it doesn't see its light at the end of the day. So my request or submission on the more technical aspect, obviously, that if people like it, there's obviously other forums where you can go and pick up the relevant technical aspects of becoming either an IBC-related professional or a post-merger integrated professional because of the core competency you have as projects. But the key value proposition that I would want to leave here is that because we are in the ages and time, Shakuni is not the model to follow. And Sri Krishna's model is extremely difficult. There has to be some hands-on basis in which you will have to get involved. You can't be a charioteer and just say, no, I'm not going to be involved. You'll have to be dirting your hands if you want that projects on either of this, insolvency or post-merger integration, to be able to be successful. So having said that, I'm conscious about the time that has been the ticker here. Yeah, so I'm conscious about my time here. What I would want to do do we need to do a question-answer session, or given the paucity of time, I will leave the organizer to say, but what I would want to, on a closure, that's what I would like to leave, that my genuine submissions for this forum is one, lobbying is essential, and I believe these possibilities are huge in this space. There is a lot of reason why, as a group, as a forum, you should look at trying to see how you can get involved in this space. I know of companies which are charging 50 lakhs a month just to do insolvency practice where only 2 people are working. 50 lakh rupees a month, where only 2 people are working. So that's the kind of potential of that space on the insolvency side. On the post-merger integration, it's again a lovely space. People who like challenges, it's a lovely space to work on and try and develop further. It takes you to a range of possibilities. So that's again, I would want to leave as a message that there's no institutional forum. It's just that as a project management institute, you might need to just get yourself abreast with certain aspects of regulations, compliances, processes from a merger integration perspective to be going out there and achieving. So that's the limited thought that I want to leave. Thanks for the patience and hearing me out. But any if questions, yes. How many minutes? Or I'll leave it to you to. Yeah.
A few minutes, yes. Questions? Any questions?
Hi, sir. Good afternoon. My name is Ajay. One question more from the finance, though I'm a hardcore project guy. So a couple of weeks back, I had read in Economic Times a comment by Kumar Mangalam Birla that globalization, a new term, globalization will be the growth engine in the coming decade.
Okay.
And this globalization will be across the globe.
Okay.
So
How is it
just
defined
your-
globalization? Because I missed out this particular.
So globalization means slow economy throughout the globe. So
That's the fact.
that would be the growth engine for the decade.
That is the fact. If you ask
So
me,
your thoughts to share on.
that is a fact. So, terms, consultants, that's what I do in most of my forums, right? So, when I speak in forums and I say, what do consultants do? Consultants throw jargon to confuse people. So, take nothing away, right? So, globalizations. I say, but if actually examine, and one of the spectrum, the whole world was driven by one engine for the last 2 decades, which is US. A group of 30 crores, just contextualize it, a group of 30 crore people consuming something in the order of $20 trillion worth of goods and services. India, 130 crore people consuming about $2.5 trillion of services. Right? Now you're looking at someone anywhere else. China possibly is an alternative, but it's a very, very different sort of economy. It can't compensate for US. Europe is dead. So now US can do as much. If you see already, all their indicators are on the age side, demography side, they are really stuck. In terms of cost dynamics, they are badly stuck. So there's as much that they can do. In fact, we are seeing, it's a very fast statement, Detroit, Chicago, they have declared bankruptcy as counties. To that extent, it is bad. So now, can India or China take up the mantle? The answer is clear no, because I am not able to visualize India ever paying $13 an hour to anyone. Right? So for us to be, so it's simple, right? Simple mechanics. I pay $13 an hour to my housemate, nothing wrong. I know we are all socialists, we all love everyone to grow. That's India, right? India in $13 an hour if I have to pay to my housemate or anyone who helps me, because that's what is being paid in US, I will be a 30 trillion economy. But where is the affordability? Where is the supply side in terms of the ability for consuming this? It will lead to huge inflation. So a slow, steady, very, very difficult way of progress is the only way. There's no two ways. That's one more reason why reform, perform, transform becomes a central theme again, where companies will be forced to come together. So we'll hear a lot about cartels and all of that. Lot. But that's the only way to survive. Because we can't substitute $13, $18 kind of minimum wage here in India ever. I'm not able to see it. Yeah? Have I reasonably responded? Yeah. Any other question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So my question is, like, now these banks are merging, like Bank of Baroda and these 2 other banks with it. So how do they actually handle it in terms of the workforce? A lot of people will be out of jobs or what?
Interesting. So this is a Hina had mentioned in my introduction. So one of my key areas that I am pursuing as a student even now, a PhD, is indeed in public finance administration. The reason I'm trying to connect this to that conversation is we have used bankers through nationalization for larger social construct or betterment. That is the whole idea of nationalization. Now, but we fail to realize that while it's okay to do all of that, but if the whole system doesn't fund its own self, it will not survive. So if I'm as a banker, no, I'm a banker, government-owned banker, I'm government-owned entity, I will keep on not removing people. I'm not saying people have to lose jobs. That's not my intention. But I'm saying unless the system becomes more efficient, there is no money to be paid. Who will pay? That's the question today in Japan. That's the question today in Europe for sure. And US, the whole idea of Detroit was supposed, I know when I was growing, Detroit was the central city in all movies, right? All auto movies, Robocops, the works, was all Detroit, right? And we grew up with the adrenaline rush that Detroit used to bring. Detroit is dead in 20 years. Why? Because they couldn't afford the payment of salaries and pensions. They were all working on defined benefit plans. India adopted defined contribution very early. We should give credit to our system also. There are pros and cons, but what I'm trying to articulate is people might lose job. I'm not disagreeing to it, but the idea is if they don't lose job, who's going to fund it? Everyone will lose. So we have to be able to manage the transition. It's an integration question. How will you slowly facilitate this movement is always a, that's why the post-merger, there's integration, huge integration happening there. SBI was stuck for nearly 4 years because the 7 babies of SBI had to merge with SBI and they didn't allow it for the same reason. So it's a fair question, but people will lose jobs, I agree, but that's the only way. We have to bite the bullet. Yeah?
Hi, sir. Last question, sorry.
The last slide, anyway, of course, PMPs and PMI, they're already integrated. Because project management institutes, that's what I meant. Most of the M&As happen in the due diligence phase, right? So, I mean, I understand that the potential opportunity, what you're telling, but most of it happens at the due diligence phase before it actually gets the post-merger implementation. So, are you indicating that integration is more from the project planning is always started early, right?
Okay, so if I were to respond that, it's a fair premise that you have brought on board. The diligence takes a lot of these questions up. I would not disagree, but when you look at diligence, it itself is a dispersed activity. So there is, again, there also, I have a major reservation. Diligence, they generally bring an accounting firm to do diligence. How will the accounting firm know how business diligence is to be done, how HR diligence is to be done, how operational diligence? Because please understand, and that's my whole quandary with discussions on mergers, acquisition in any forum, professional or otherwise, is people fail to realize diligence is not creating a document. Diligence is creating a blueprint. And today, if you're asking me, my personal view, based on the number of transactions I've seen, 7 out of 10 deals don't have a detailed blueprint when the deal is done. It is all a subsequent halo. We all have that halo post-transactions. We are all intelligent Gautam Buddhas. That's what happens. So if you're asking me, that's why it's more critical, because there is a report on operations sitting somewhere, there's a report on HR sitting somewhere, there's a report on accounting process sitting somewhere, and business sales pipeline sitting somewhere. They're all sitting in different domains, different people. There has to be a central guy who's able to integrate everything and then take it forward from there. If diligence is not done well, and that is also a case, at least 3 to 4 deals out of every 10 I've seen, diligence is on the business side is not done. What they do as diligence is only accounting, finance, HR. No one goes and looks at sales pipeline. Oh, where is the sales coming from? Continuity of sales. What kind of contracts? Change of control. There are so many things that happens when you look at sales, revenues. Very limited stuff done. So a good project manager integrator will come there and he will look at this.
The early involvement is more critical than the...
Yeah, but then you have to be able to. CAs are very good at lobbying. I told you, right? We'll get into anything and everything, whether you are adapted or not, but not the case with. Yeah, you should be able to lobby and get yourself into the right places. Yeah.
That's enough questions for now. Please, JP will be around for the next 15 minutes or so, and. But unfortunately, we can't allow more questions because we are running short of time. A huge round of applause to JP, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I don't think many of us would have thought that we'd have someone come on stage and basically identify job opportunities for us today. So, thank you, JP. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Could you please stay on stage for just 2 more minutes? Vicky Panjwani, who is the Vice President of Memberships at PMI Mumbai Chapter. Please come on stage, kindly accept a token of our appreciation.
Thank you so much.